So talk about being a Zombie. One of the new muscles that I've needed to develop is to look into the camera and imagine you. So I'm seeing you and I'm wondering where you find yourselves in all your different offices and spaces and homes. And it's just wonderful to connect like this. So a very hearty welcome. And for those of you who are new to our call, a special welcome. And some of you have been with us for all these weeks since we started 6 weeks ago. So just for the new people joining us, just to frame what these sessions are about, it's a very wide invitation to leaders from very different angles of this life we are living at the moment, from all different countries. And we've got people from small businesses, NGOs, we've got corporate leaders from a variety of industry. But most importantly, I can feel more and more it's about being active citizens, fellow human beings, sharing concerns and sharing hopes. So a very big welcome. And we try to do three things. One is to reach out into different perspectives. And just to listen to what people are experiencing in very different corners of the world. Secondly, we try to do some sense making through listening to people's distilled view of where they think we are. And then thirdly, to find emerging practices as we are learning through this crisis. And Casper, thank you for founding this and being the person who started and catalyzed it. So over to you.
Good. So just one or two logistics. We've got Eskom, which is our national service provider when it comes to power utilities, working in the street. So Wi-Fi is not that strong on this side. And if for whatever reason everything goes blank, just take 5 minutes and dial in again. We will make a plan on this side. If I, for whatever reason, because of the bad Wi-Fi, like, you know, you get freeze and I stay like in one position like that, I need you to help me. And the best way to help me is if I look at the screen and I see other people just in the same position like that, standing still, that will give me an idea that I'm frozen. So just to make sure that we can practice that, I just want to see if it's going to work. So just imagine you got to copy me, but you got to do it ASAP. So that we don't waste time, is if I end up like this, what do you have to do? Okay, just hold it there. I just want to take a screenshot. Okay, I've got that. Thank you. So that's what we're going to do if I, for whatever reason, freeze. And Simon, I would think that counts as a mindfulness practice to get everybody here as well. Would that be a presencing practice?
That's actually the deepest presencing practice you can actually do.
Fantastic, thank you. So I hope you all are here right now. So I'm sitting here with emotions today because I'm sitting here with a shirt with flowers on. And my mom turned 80 last night, and it was her first Zoom call ever in her life, and the first time that she turned 80. And she loves flowers. And I couldn't hug her last night, and it was quite an extraordinary experience to be in a birthday party with my mom of 80. At Zoom, which I normally hate, but I loved Zoom last night. So although I have flowers on the outside, I still have dread in the inside. I'm sitting with so many different conflicted feelings inside of me. I am the Ramaphosa fan in our country. I cannot wait to vote for that man to be our president. I've got so much respect for Ramaphosa. And right now, I don't even want to see his face because what's happening with stage 4 in South Africa, stage 3. I just think he's a very bad leader at the moment. So I'm conflicted with Ramaphosa being my hero and Ramaphosa not my hero. I'm so proud of the air traffic control of South Africa preventing people flying in from all over the world to bring the virus in. I'm so proud of that system. And at the same time, 2 of my best friends are stuck in Japan for more than a week. I wish I can go to wherever I can break a table or a door and grab somebody by the neck to get my friends back. So I sit with pride and absolute anger for that service. I'm a trained capitalist. I grew up in a capitalist world. I believe in capitalism. Right now, in the same body, It's part of a socialist waking up. And it's so conflicted. It's so opposite. I've got these opposite emotions and feelings. And so I really feel conflicted. So bright and flowery, but on the inside, scared and dreadful about what's happening. So I was wondering, Dr. Weitzman, if you could maybe give us some insight. I'm sure I'm not the only person necessarily sit with conflicted feelings, and the risk is here I can become the biggest Trump supporter or a Trump hater. But I mean, what's the defense mechanism? How do we deal with opposing conflicted internal world?
Well, such a great question, and I'm sure to a greater or lesser extent, everybody's experiencing that in increasingly accelerated and intensified ways. I certainly am noticing that in myself, even within a day. I mean, many people are referring to this as kind of the roller coaster experience, from hour to hour. I could come back with another question, Casper, which is, I'm wondering how you are managing to reconcile those conflicting feelings. Like, is there something that you're doing or not doing that is making room or making space, or do you find that you actually have to push some of those one feeling away to make space for another?
No, I find it's easy for me to go either way, to be 100% Ramaphosa fan or not at all. It's difficult for me to sit with both, that he's a brilliant leader and things are not working. And so how I'm dealing with it is with difficulty. I'm more exhausted than I normally would be. I think to hold both is tough. And I'm doing it by, I think at the moment, just being aware of it, observing it.
Yeah, thank you. That's incredibly helpful. It is very difficult, I find, when especially we were talking about the emotional level, where emotions arise, which seem to conflict, exactly as Casper's experiencing, and many of us are experiencing a lot of the time. So the question is, well, first of all, what is actually happening in the human mind when this is occurring? And secondly, if we have a little bit more of an understanding of this, how might we begin to turn towards and approach this conflicted state in a way that allows us to make wiser decisions? Because I think we could all agree, no question, that wise decision making right now is far preferable than unwise decision making. It's always been that way, but it's even more so now. We don't want to be digging ourselves into a deeper hole, or making the hole that we're in deeper, and so we can't get out of it. So it's interesting that if you look at the kind of history of the Western history of understanding the mind, Sigmund Freud 100+ years ago was the first to identify that the human mind goes into conflict with itself. He called it an intrapsychic conflict. And it's like, and mostly that happens like an iceberg has 9/10 of itself under the water. Most of that conflict happens under the surface of the mind, subconsciously or unconsciously. But in lockdown, because of the accentuation, acceleration, intensification of everything, a lot of what was perhaps below the surface of the water is emerging above the surface of the water. And so at an emotional level, these conflicted or difficult emotional states are arising. And one of the things that the human mind does, especially in childhood, is that because these emotions are too overwhelming to deal with at the same time, is to create a split or a separation between them. And so it becomes like a digital 1 or a 0. It becomes binary. I'm either feeling this or I'm feeling that. There isn't enough space, especially in a young child's mind, to hold both. This feeling and this feeling when they're in conflict with each other, especially if it's in relation to somebody I love and respect, like a president or a mother or a father. The most compelling and pressing issue is that because the state of lockdown and the global pandemic and all its social and economic consequences are increasing our stress and trauma level, as we've spoken on this forum before, what that results in is that the psyche tends to regress. It tends to go back to one of its earliest patterns of coping. And one of our earliest patterns of coping is to split or separate one feeling from another if they are in conflict with each other. In psychological terms, we call that splitting. Literally splitting. It's like Caspar used the image in a meeting earlier this week. It's like a piece of light, a bolt of lightning comes down on a tree and cleaves the tree into two. And then all we can see is a 1 or a 0. I love you, I hate you. You're the best president, you're the worst president, you're the most amazing person, and you're the most useless person. I'm being dramatic, but that to make a point. And then what tends to happen is we push away the one or the 0, and we only see the other side. And so as a result, we lose a more whole version, a whole picture of whatever we're splitting into two. Now, we might be splitting our souls into two, and so we will only get a smaller version of ourselves, or we might split another into two and not see the whole of them. And the risk then is that we lose sight of their innate humanness. We forget that everybody has all of these different elements. But if I only can see one and I'm blinded to the rest, I tend to forget the full extent of the humanness, which usually means I forget my own humanness. And the implicit consequence of that is a loss of relationality, or a loss of connection, and a loss of trust. And so it's very difficult to allow somebody to lead, for example, extending what Caspar's introduced, if we feel out of connection or out of relationship. So the question is that how do we reincorporate? Such an amazing word, reincorporate, because it incorporates the word corpus, which means body. How do we become re-embodied or reincorporate this separation? And Caspar's named one of those things is, first of all, to become aware that the split is occurring. If I'm very angry with somebody, what is the opposite that I'm pushing away? How can I allow and make room and make space for feelings and thoughts and emotions that are not immediately the same to coexist in the same mind? And the first place is to be honest, then to feel and inquire. And perhaps the most challenging part is to drop. The greatest distance you could ever drop is the 18 inches from the head to the heart. And simply be with, and I know we're going to explore this during the session, be with and breathe with and invite into the full range of emotional experience, even just for a moment. And in that moment, we become more whole, because we become more authentic, and we become more full, and we become more real. And so out of our eyes, we will then see a fuller human being in front of us and come into a deeper, wiser relationship with them.
Thank you. So maybe it's a good idea, Simon, thank you, just for a moment to pause there. And yeah, it doesn't feel right for me just to move on to the next topic, but maybe just an opportunity to invite all parts of you into this conversation, because that would be really participation. You can even don't even have to look at the screen, just for a moment, take a breath and notice all of you being here. So Simon, thank you for that. And I'm gonna almost split and go almost from a very beautiful way of listening to our humanness to more of a work or a leadership perspective, and again zoom out, and we'll get back to this topic. And again, just for everybody to note that when we do speak about polarities or splitting or conflict and stuff, things might come up for you, and we will be available after the session still. You can just stay on if you have more questions or more to say or more to ask. We will still be available after 1 o'clock. And I want to zoom us out to a place of where there's a full range of humanness. And that's Germany, because if there's one country in this world that that experienced the ups and the lows and splitting and confliction and conflict, it would be Germany. And I'm very, very excited to have Jörg Strohmeyer on the call. And Jörg is from a town or a city called Stuttgart, and Jörg also happens to be the MD of the second biggest construction company in Germany at the moment. And the reason why, Jörg, we go straight to you is I know you've said no for these sessions because you speak to Elon Musk, which is a South African, by the way, most of the time. So I did say to him, who the hell is Elon Musk? But we'll bring you in sooner than later so you can take the call with Elon at 12:30. But I'm very interested. What's the humanness? What's the full range? What's the conflictions for you in Germany at the moment? And thank you for making time available, Jörg.
Yes, Casper, Dina, thanks for having me. A couple of words to start off with. There is light at the end of the tunnel. Germany went through a quite dramatic situation 6 weeks ago when it all started. You know, when lockdowns were being discussed, which were totally against everything that every single German person would believe in. You know, his right of free movement, which is Article 2 of the constitutional law in Germany. It's something never heard of. To suppress the right of free movement. So the German population has struggled to get along with this whole COVID-19 situation. And they were not used to a government making laws, changing laws, because we are a federal democracy with 17 states, and basically each governor in each state makes and takes his own decisions. And for the first time in a very long time, everybody's worked together. And I think what has made it all work so well is being so agile about it. Speaking about the issues every day, looking at the development of COVID-19, how will it affect the whole population? How will it affect business? What do we need to do to look after the old and the sick in our country? And we are in a totally different situation than we are in South Africa, or you are in South Africa. You know, this is a first world country. Income levels are far higher. Social security is in place. The government has enough money. Nobody has to go hungry at the end of the day if he's not going to work. So we have, put it this way, we have luxury problems. But still, the fear of the population, if you take something away, or if they're missing something, or if they have a fear of losing their jobs, I think is the same everywhere in the world. We've, as a company, and myself, I have 72 branch offices all over Europe. I used to travel every week, and every night I was in a different bed, in a different hotel room, and things have changed immediately and quite quickly, and very positively. We have found ways like Zoom conferences or Teams conferences to communicate with each other, to be on a daily contact level. So we have managed to get through a situation where there is light at the end of the tunnel. At the moment, since yesterday, the German government and all the governments, after 6 weeks, are discussing how can we reopen restaurants, movies, ice skating rinks, how can we restart football games. So it's taken 6 weeks, although we were in the middle of it. We could see it coming from Austria, we could see it coming from Switzerland, we could see it coming from Bergamo, from Milan, and how different countries handled it all around us. Slovakia, the Czech Republic, Poland had severe lockdowns. In Germany, we only made recommendations to the public. So we weren't really locked in. People could walk outside of their homes, could go for a run. So we have a totally different situation. But the whole population went about the whole issues quite well. And I think the most conflicting decisions we have to make now and every day is how quickly do we let people go about business as normal. Nothing will be normal until we have a vaccine. We all are aware of this. So we are keeping distance, 1.5 to 2 meters, and that's the way we're going about it, and quite successfully.
Jörg, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, I saw pictures of an important meeting you had with Tesla and everybody there, but the distance with masks on everybody's table, it sounds like you're ready to take on the world again, and that this is like an interesting social experiment, but you don't sit necessarily with the trauma that we might be sitting on this side with people going hungry.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. Thank you, Jörg, and good luck with your meetings, and thank you for your time and effort, and thank you, Eva, for organizing, which is your brother, to come and support us in South Africa. Jörg, we appreciate that. So
yes, because I'm a real African man. That's what I'm called here in Germany. I mean, I used to live and I grew up in Vanderbijl Park. So yeah.
There you are. Good. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So talking about confliction and polarities and opposites, another area in the world that knows conflict has also got 200 or 400,000, 500,000 people, like in Stuttgart. And that is an area just north of Johannesburg called Diepsloot. Now, it took a while, and I'm still hoping that we can get Brown on the line, but I want to introduce Brown, and I'm not sure if Brown is on the line. We tried yesterday because data is not that available. Brown, are you somewhere on the line? Because some of the names have got numbers. Can you just give me an indication, please? So this is where I wish I had a backup team. So let me just try again. Brown, can you maybe hear me or not? Good. So it does not seem.
Casper, I've been scrolling and I can't see the name, but like you say, there are a few people with only numbers on their squares, so I'm not sure.
So there is a Brown on page 4.
So if Brown can hear me, I would just like to see if I can unmute Brown.
Oh, yes.
And on page 4.
Yeah.
Let me just for a moment see. Brown might just be, and I somehow can't unmute. Brown, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Fantastic. So yesterday we tried. So Brown is from Green Door, and Green Door is a temporary shelter for survivors of rape and domestic violence in Diepsloot. So Diepsloot, for those international audience, it's one of the most violent, it's one of the toughest places in South Africa to live. It's got the same number of people than Stuttgart, where Jörg just spoke from. And Brown is often called the hero, absolutely the hero of Diepsloot. And it's because it's just his life passion. He looks and he supports specifically women who come from abusive relationships. So yesterday we tried, and unfortunately we can't have a video because it's just not a place with enough data. But Brown, I'm so glad to have you on the call. Can you give us an idea what's it like to be in trauma or in a difficult space with conflict in a place where the world is in conflict?
Thank you, Casper, for introducing me. My name is Brown Lekekela. I'm from Diepsloot in South Africa. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can all hear you. Thank you.
Okay. It is very difficult, even if maybe it was not because of COVID-19. Even if the COVID-19 did not happen, we live in a very, very difficult communities whereby there is no jobs, whereby there is a high level of crime, and there is a high level of inequality. So COVID-19 made it worse for us here in Diepsloot, because people don't have shelters. People are squatting in an informal settlement, whereby in one shed, most people, they live a family of 5 people or more than 5 people in one shed. So the process of social distancing, they cannot social distance in the house. So it's very terrible and challenging. So as we see that most of the people, they are out in the street as if like there is nothing that is happening. It is not because of they like to go out on the street, but it's the way they are living, the way, the condition that they are living under force them to be on the street for many reasons, looking for food, looking for something that they can have more money to buy themselves for food, and there is not enough accommodation for themselves inside in their area.
And Brown, I mean, we spoke yesterday, and I mean, it'd be good for me to hear people that's already in so much difficulty. Does the virus feature? Does it come up as something that people are scared of, or people in your area, in your world? There are so many other dangers, so many other things that threaten your life. What is your experience, and how do you deal with it? How do you help people that's already in so much difficulty?
Yeah, people are aware of COVID-19 and the danger that comes with it. But the unemployment, the poverty level, it makes them as if they don't care anymore, because they cannot sit in their room, stay at home as the government is saying. They cannot, because for them to have food, they have to go out and look out for food and ask for food from people that they have. So it's very difficult, it's very challenging. And the level of crime is going up, crime that I deal with on daily basis, crime on women, crime on children is going up, because of now the perpetrators are there with the victims 24/7. So they come and report to the Grindor about the rape cases. They come to report about the domestic violence. And if I don't open up and talk to them, do counseling, and help them the way they want help, maybe they say they're looking for temporary shelter, or they want to open up a case, there is nowhere that they will go. It's either they will go back to the abuser and be dead by tomorrow, or maybe I don't know what they can do. And it's risky even for me, because I don't know the condition that the client, is he infected or not. Even myself, I put myself in danger to allow her to come to my space. But if I say I don't help them, again, it will eat me inside when I find out that that individual is dead, he's been killed by the husband and wife. So it's catch-22 situation. I close Grindor, then people will die because of the crime that is happening. And if I'm opening now, it's danger to me, because those people, they might be infected because they are going around everywhere and they might get infection.
Brown, thank you. I mean, it's very difficult for me to say thank you to you in the sense for such a message, and difficult, because I would rather face you and be closer to you saying that. And on behalf of everyone for making that effort, I know it was a risk yesterday just for you to engage in a session where you had to move for us to test the data. And for the rest of you, there will be information about the Green Shelter afterwards. And to just take a moment, because right now I'm conflicted, because I can't believe I'm sitting on a Zoom call where I might be out there doing something. It's both and. So just for a moment, notice how's that message from a opposite part of the world. None of them being right or wrong, but both of them just being opposites of the world. That is the polarity. Both of those exist in the same world. And maybe you want to write one word that comes up for you of where you are right now in the chat box, just one word, and come back just as a presencing practice. Just take a deep breath and know that, then I try to tell myself, just having this conversation might also help, or listening to Brown might also help. And I know when we're conflicted, we need courage, and courage is to move on the edge of tears. And I'm certainly on the edge of tears after listening to that. Brown, thank you so much. And we'll speak again. So from that space, Sonja, Sonja Blichner, as most of you would know from More and Beyond Cognitive Edge, there's so much language in what we heard from Jörg and from Brown. A lot of the conflict is also what we pick up from clients is about language. So, or maybe before I go to you, just maybe another 15 seconds of breathing for myself and for all of us after listening to that. You can just put your eyes on screensaver. I certainly need to take a breath. Just put your eyes on screensaver, maybe look at some other thing in your office and just notice if your heart or head or gut is in a different place, and see if you can just drop into being here. Yeah, and then with respect to Brown's contribution and Jörg's, let's move on, and we might get some information from you, Sonja. What is language doing in our world at the moment? I mean, are we at war? And if we are at war, that's maybe why I'm so tired.
Yeah, Casper, I think I can so resonate with just the sentiment of what we're talking about today. I think even just listening to some of the previous contributions, I am so conflicted in myself in terms of, on the one hand, the light at the end of the tunnel and the world seemed to be restarting, and then on the other hand, not really wanting the world to restart in the same way, and wanting to go back to the old normal because, of the normal that exists in other areas like Diepsloot, and that sense that we can't continue with that old world. And I think, I've been reflecting a lot on the language we use, and in particular the metaphors we use, because I think there's a wonderful book, The Metaphors We Live By. I can put the reference in the email. Basically what it talks about is how the metaphors we use shape our worlds, and they almost become invisible to us. And we use metaphor when we are faced with something completely unknown to us. So it's a way of scaffolding our understanding. So we link something that is known or unknown to something that is known to help us make sense. But then those metaphors become largely invisible to us, and we don't interrogate them, and we're not intentional about them. So you asked about war, but I think maybe before I get there, some of the other ones that's in the field at the moment are quite interesting, especially if we look at this notion of splitting, because I think there's a really interesting split going on in terms of agency. And so some of the metaphors we use, like there are ones out there like, it's an earthquake, it's a tsunami, we're facing an abyss. And some of, in the face of natural disasters or natural things like that, it's almost like human beings have no agency. We're kind of just victims in that modality. And then there are other kind of less threatening ones, but that has the same effect. So there are others that says we're in a cocoon, or some even speak of hibernation. And again, it kind of puts us in this passive state where we have no agency against what it is that we're facing. And then there's another interesting one where we are projecting a lot of agency and almost evil onto the virus, where people are talking about ground zero, which is almost like a terrorism effect, and also the Holocaust, which again puts us in a victim space. And then we've got this very dominant theme of the war. And I think it's one way to mobilize people to say that we're in a war You know, we all have to pull together. It's an invisible enemy. I know Ramaphosa has also used warfare language. But then if we start interrogating that a bit, you know, in wars, there are collateral damage. If we put our doctors and our nurses and people, for example, in retail, you know, like the cashiers in Woolworths, or, you know, all the couriers out there, if they are on the front lines of war, basically we're saying that they're soldiers. And if you're a soldier, there's almost like this unspoken expectation that you should be willing to sacrifice yourself for the greater good, which is not really, I think, a very healthy way of thinking about this. War also very quickly becomes about the numbers, and it strips away empathy, which I think, especially in this call, getting in touch with empathy and care is so important. So this warfare metaphor that we're all kind of accepting, and, you know, I'm guilty of using it in my language. I think we really need to become more intentional about how we speak, you know, and then just to briefly link the language that we've been using for isolating, you know, so this idea of lockdown. Lockdown happens in prisons. Lockdown happens when you're facing a riot. So if you put lockdown and warfare together, then what does it make us? Are we prisoners of war? Are we POWs? Because then again, we are stripped of agency, and we're also stripped of humanity and empathy. And so I really think that we need to become more intentional about this. And, you know, even another one that seems more positive is the great pause. But then if I hit the pause button on my CD player or on Netflix, there's an assumption that when play starts, we're going back to the same movie or the same song, which is, personally for me, I don't want to go back to how it used to be. I think we need to transform. So I don't really have answers for what better metaphors would be for us to use. You know, some that I've come across, for example, is seeing is hermitage, or, you know, it's almost doing what the monks or the wizards do, and isolating to get more wisdom, or to just enter silence for greater wisdom. And then another really interesting one is the pandemic as a river, and how our joint efforts, so the collective efforts, can shore up the riverbanks to make sure that it doesn't turn into a flood. And I think what I like about the river analogy is rivers end up in the ocean. It ends up in a wide open space, a larger option field, a place of possibility. It's not like a war that just ends up in a place of complete desolation. So I don't know if that is helpful, Casper. I think I'm also, you know, especially after some of the like, you know, hearing Brown speak, you know, just the emotional impact of that, and just understanding that we really need to rethink not only our language, but how language shapes the world, and how we are active agents in this. We're not just passive recipients.
Mm. Thank you, Sonia. Thank you for that. And I think language language also, I mean, even if I'm conflicted, it drives me in a way, because if I'm using war, then my next actions might be very different than if I use the word of pause or a river. And we are in a time frame where we cannot just reflect. We also need to take next actions, and language is so important in it. And I look at some of the comments or the words on the group chat as well. It's a confliction. So if I listen to York's language, I want to create a to-do list and I want to get into action. If I listen to Brown, I'm paralyzed. It's like, what's the next action? So it's, again, just language or the sentiment or words can get us to do things. And I want to shift from this into a more almost an action mode. And it's William Elliott from Get Things Done. And again, you can get many more of these resources in the email that we sent afterwards. But William, it's almost a paralysis at times with me, or my to-do list goes up to 50 things. What advice can you for us? Because we are in a time where we need to take the next best step.
Yeah, thank you, Casper. I think just to say a few things about the mind or the brain, it doesn't really matter so much where things locate. But I think I want to come back to just the sort of physical stuff. So in the 60s, researchers found that parents would sleep through all sorts of noise, but if the baby went they would wake up. And they discovered the reticular formation, which filters what information is filtered through to consciousness. And how that reticular formation is activated will drive attention. And so that presents a trap and an opportunity. If we focus only on the problem and don't move to what can I do about it, how do I move to a place of agency, we'll just keep collecting paralyzing information. So, and then in terms of working in linear time, how do we start with where we are? And what are we doing to move forward? If I want to hire someone, I think about hiring someone. And so I have to forecast into the future in a very specific way. So if you can just bring up the worksheet there for us, Casper, and something that we'll circulate afterwards, but perhaps something to help with the rigor of moving from the problem to a desired outcome and an action. So now, if you take, don't worry about the examples at this point, Casper, maybe if you can just go back one. I just want to talk about the problem description. Sometimes we'll be anxious, like I feel helpless, or, you know, I don't know what to do. I worry about social unrest. We have to move from the problem to a description of what we're trying to achieve. And that might mean understand more about the threats of COVID, or it might mean, so we need to peg somewhere something that we are aiming towards. And once we've got that in place, we can then think, what's the exact next action I can take? And if you can just put up the examples there, the possibility of social unrest, if we just keep that in our focus, we haven't moved to an outcome statement. And those depend very much on your values and what you're shooting for. So social unrest, contingency plans signed off by EXCO. Now that starts to focus the reticular formation into some sort of forward movement. The second one is company contributions to social stability crystallized. What are we doing to make a difference, to reduce the gap? And then what's the very next action? And we have to get exact. And if we, because the front part of the brain is thinking about the goal, but the back part has to execute. So it needs to be very specific. Email Susan to set up a team brainstorming. So what happens with our to-do lists, they're vague and they don't have an exact next action, and they're not tied to something that we've thought about consciously to move towards. And the outcome statement needs to be either one I'm looking into, or at least 51% believable. If we look at the second example here, and there'll be more examples in our handout. Social distancing at work, how do I do that? We can just keep worrying. But if we shoot at something, if we aim at an outcome, optimal social distancing plans signed off, that starts to think, so how do I move that forward? And then it might be an email to someone. Now, we're still in linear time, so it's never going to change. At some point, even if we're trying to land on Mars one day, what's the mini project? What's the outcome? We want to establish a food resource. Okay, what's the next action? So asking about outcomes and next actions is really the way we in linear time move towards something. And this gives us just a worksheet to move from problem to, and it might be a very small project. So I don't know if that helps.
William, can I just, so if my to-do list gets so long and long and long, it's most probably not a to-do list. Is that what you're saying, to be very careful? Because I want to do things, I want to fix things, is to really deconstruct that. Otherwise, it's just going to become longer, or it's not really. Is that what you're saying?
Well, firstly, the content on your to-do list. Don't put things like contact Joe or email Joe. So firstly, if the to-do list item isn't specific, and you have 30 of them, your brain has to rethink every one. Am I going to email Joe? Am I going to phone Joe? So firstly, it must be very clear to give the back brain the execution instruction. If it's too long, firstly, we have to face reality. If it's 100, make a conscious choice to put 60 of them on hold. It doesn't help to pretend they don't exist, because then they're going to be running around in your mind. So we do need to make a short list or something that is manageable, but we need to make decisions about what we put on hold, rather than just the sense of overwhelm because they're drifting around undefined.
Thank you. Thank you, William. And there would be much more information about that from GTD, and you can contact. I think it's very helpful for me, also sitting between paralysis and overworking. But I mean, I had to listen to York, I had to listen to Brown. William is about a to-do list. We need to action. Simon gave us some idea of the psychological impact. Sonia, in her language, I need to focus on my language, but I'm also here. I also need some support. And what we see more and more is we need compassion. In the polarities and in these difficulties, I feel either paralyzed, heart sore, heartbroken, or motivated. Dina, and we've also got Nubantu on the line with us. And Nubantu is the managing director at Just in Time Solutions. So she's also known as the systems intervener. She's a force of nature, a mindfulness coach and a practitioner. And yeah, the times I've listened to her, I've just learned so much. So Dina, you and Nubantu, can you help us here about compassion?
Thank you, Casper. And I was lucky to spend time with you this morning, Nubantu, in one of the mindfulness practices, which is a daily nourishing experience in times when we feel so exhausted and overwhelmed. And when Casper and I spoke about this session, I said to him it will be really wonderful to inquire into your wisdom around not just wise action that William is helping us to get to, but the place from which it comes from. And how do we connect to that deeper place inside ourselves that's wiser and more compassionate? So any guidance from that, especially reading the words that everybody posted earlier about our big heartache at the moment, and it makes us feel quite powerless.
Sanibonani, that's a Zulu greeting that says, I see you. I see all of who you are. I see your pain. I see your joy. I see your suffering. I see your compassion. And normally when we see, we tend to externalize the seeing. It's seeing the other. And not all the time we take time to see ourselves. And the times we're in right now are calling for us to say to ourselves, Sawubona. And then when I'm seeing myself, what is it that I see? This is a contradiction, and we're talking about polarities here. So the seeing could be in two forms. It could be seeing which is over-identified with who I think I am, so therefore I see myself as that. And it could be a seeing that says to myself, I see you, I see that you are now suffering. What do you need right now? And with this over-identification, that could bring for us some angst, because I see myself in a particular way, which is the self that I bring into who I am. And so to practice compassion for ourselves is a practice of non-self. And which means that I am more than my role. I'm more than what I expect myself to be. Because what happens during these times, if for instance, I see myself as someone who's strong, who's courageous, who's resourceful, and all of a sudden now, I see someone who's falling apart. there's little compassion that I would have for myself. And the split that we talk about as well, because that which I do not like in myself, I tend to push away. That brings suffering. If I hate Cyril Ramaphosa, I love him another time. How do I even look at that? I am all of that. I'm good, I'm not a good. I'm courageous, I'm fearful. And if I take that and become whole and holistic in my approach, then I tend to be compassionate towards myself because I'm compassionate about that suffering. So the practice of non-self here is very important. And also we're talking about the duality of nature. We see ourselves as separate from things. If I'm separate from those who I think are not me, that also brings some suffering. So it's all how do we merge? And as we merge, we look at what emerges. And with that, I'd invite everyone to really go and check on Thich Nhat Hanh's poem, Call Me By My True Names. Because what I like is still me. And what I push away, that is still me. And when I hold these two sides together, then I love myself, all of me. Thank you.
Nubantu, can I just ask you, if we're starting on that journey of bringing compassion to self, what are one or two simple things one can start to do on a daily basis? What would be a practice?
For me, it's the sawubona yourself, seeing yourself. How curious are you about the state you are in from moment to moment? As you're on yourself, just asking yourself, what's happening now? Who is this that's suffering? You know, that brings yourself to your soul and yourself, to you, who you are, because you start to embrace whatever state that emerges. And through that, that brings about a lot of self-knowledge, a lot of self-discovery. And knowing that whatever state you are in, it also changes to another state. So that just holding it all. And it's not easy. It is a practice, as what you say, Dina, sitting in the fire and thanking yourself for being there and saying, that is me too.
Thank you, Nubantu. And I see some of the people are asking, what is the poem's name? And we will include it in the email. It's called Please Call Me By My True Names by Thich Nhat Hanh. And I have a copy of it, so we will send it to you in the next day. And Nubantu, as you speak about welcoming it all and having compassion for it all, what I've experienced in that practice is that the things that come up for me, once I've been able to do that and how I want to act in the world, is usually a much wiser decision and wiser action than when I'm too scared to sit with the whole picture. So when Simon spoke earlier in his opening about how do we make sure that we do wise decision making, it arises from a place when that compassion exists. So thank you very much.
And we have elephants in Africa. This is massive. You can't eat it all at the same time, bite-sized. And you found, as you take small bites, discovering, and another layer comes through.
Tina, can I thank you, Nabanta? Can I also just ask a question, Nabanta? So my feelings of sadness and dread and fear about all of these things, really feeling it, even listening to Brown, that's a form of compassion for me to know what I'm feeling and to feeling it, not to kind of try to get rid of it. Is that a form of compassion, to be tired and to look after myself as well, or just to be fearful and to be real about the fact that I'm scared?
Oh yes, Caspar, self-care is very important, and making sure, because when we allow that suffering, we get into a space of vulnerability. And when we are vulnerable, that also is an opportunity for us to be empathic. And then from there, and I think for me, what this is saying is the fluid nature of occurrences, because even that sadness does not last for long. And even when you're happy, it doesn't last for long. How do we then practice what the Buddhists call samadhi, which is the middle road? How can I practice equanimity and be okay with being sad and being happy, knowing that neither of those states lasts permanently?
Thank you so much. And I found a slide here that might also summarize. I think I found a slide. I hope it's somewhere here, and it would be that it says, if you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy yourself, well, practice compassion, from the Dalai Lama. So it seems like it's both. And Simon, I would like to give you the daunting task to close this, what's me, an emotional session in a good way. And please, all of you, realize that you can also stay on. We are still available afterwards. You started it so eloquently with some science and what splitting is. Please, can you help me and close the session in a good way? I don't know what to do.
Thanks, Kapi, and I can rest assured neither do I. So we won't do anything, and we've got a few minutes to not do anything. If we can all collectively give ourselves over for the next few minutes to not have to do anything. And as Caspar has been inviting us, these moments of just pausing. And maybe if you'll be willing to center as much attention as you have available in the region of your chest, so that you can place your attention, your awareness inside the chest. And just noticing that the chest is moving, expanding through the rib cage and the breastbone, and then contracting. And that this movement that we call the sensation of movement in the chest region is associated with breathing in and breathing out. And that we can simply be with the sensation of breathing in and breathing out, and the experience in the chest expanding and contracting. And perhaps you might be willing to experiment just for a few seconds of asking what feeling, like echo, is sitting in the chest from today's conversation. Something that has touched you or moved you. Even if it was difficult, maybe even especially if it was difficult. And not doing anything for a moment with this feeling or this sensation or this experience, but embracing it by allowing it to be as it is, breathing with it as it is. acknowledging for a moment what is here in the chest and in the human heart that we share. Holding this simple experience as at the same time you are being held by everybody in this room. Thank you.